Hello and welcome to another Deva tutorial. Today we will be explaining how to use the Deva CMM rack and tools functionality. First we need to open the Deva config editor. Remember to enter the access code. Navigate to the Rack and Tools tab and make sure the property Racks Installed is set to Installed, and do the same for the Tools Installed property. Click on the Racks Properties property to open the configuration window. Here we can define a rack. Before defining a rack, it is recommended you go through the setup procedure described in the manual that came with your rack. You will need to do this so you can fill in the values for the orientation coordinate system at the bottom of the window here. The X, Y, and Z offset are the offset in machine coordinates from the machine datum position to the center of the first port of the rack. The X, Y, and Z rotations are the rotations of the rack relative to the back of the machine. For more information on this, please consult the Deva manual. Once you are done, you can give the rack a name and choose its type. Next, you can describe each port of the rack. You can choose if it is free, unavailable, or only to be used by a specific component. The unavailable option can be useful if a component takes up a large amount of space and overlaps with another port. When you specify a port to only accept a specific component, that component will always be stored in that port or another with that designation, regardless if it can fit in the first free port. Now you can enter the rack's offset you found earlier, and the X, Y, and Z rotations of the rack. The rotations are defined using the right-hand rule. You will also need to define the A and B rotations of the probe head controller. If you do not have a probe head controller, leave these values blank. The angles should be set to allow the probe head to enter and leave the rack with the correct orientation. Click the Accept button to save the defined rack. Now you can define additional racks using the same process. Once you are finished defining racks, close the window and open the Tools Properties window. Here we can define a tool by stacking components. Click the Add button and give the tool a name. You will now be able to pick a stack of components. You will notice that only components that are compatible with the component above are available. You will also need to specify the machine connector type. In my case, that is AJN. Once you have finished defining tools, click OK to close the Tool Properties window. Click Apply to save the changes you have made to the configuration, and then click Close. Next, open the Deva Rack and Tool Utility program. First things first, we need to datum the machine if it isn't already. Now we can store the new tools in the racks. At the bottom of the window, we can see all the ports of the racks and their contents. Check if the ports here match the actual ports, otherwise later operations may cause a crash. To do this, you can clear all the ports or clear an individual port using the buttons on the bottom right of the window. For this tutorial, I recommend you remove all the components from the ports. To add tools to the racks, you will need to use the storing system. To store a new tool, click the Store button and then click the Store New button. You will reach a window that will allow you to choose a tool to store. It will show you how to assemble that tool on the machine connector. If it tells you to load a component from the rack, you must take that component from the rack and use it to assemble the tool. Once you have assembled the tool, click the Store button. Once the storing operation is complete, you will see the components displayed in the ports at the bottom of the window. Once the components of each tool are stored in the racks, you can change between them. To do this, click the Change button and select the tool you want to change to. Click Confirm and it will store the current tool and pick up the target tool. In this case, there was no current tool, so it is simply picking up the target tool. If you want to store the current tool, you can click Store and then click Store Current. Finally, if an error occurs, you will have to reset the controller. You can do this by opening the machine window and clicking Reset. You can also see the errors and warnings that have occurred during the program's lifetime in the log window. Now you should know everything you need to use the Deva rack and tools system. Thanks for listening to this Deva tutorial. If you have any questions or problems, please consult the Deva manual for a more in-depth explanation or email Deva support@deva.co.uk.